Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Talking with Tonya. I'm your host, Pastor Tonya with Oxnaz Online, and I'm so glad that you decided to spend your time with me today because I want to introduce you to one of my dearest of friends with a transformational story that I know is going to be inspirational to you and will be a source of encouragement to you. She's going to share with us how she went from being rejected to being rescued by radical love. So this is my friend Nicole. She is a mother to two boys, and she just got a new grandbaby girl who is adorable. And then she's a mom of a beautiful dog, which I happen to personally think is the most beautiful dog I've ever seen, and even a fur baby that has just recently slinked in behind her on the couch to go to sleep. And so, but in addition to loving on her sons, her grandbaby, her fur babies, she's a paramedic. And she is also our kids ministry director with Oxford Church of the Nazarene. While on her free time, she's studying for ministerial studies. So this is one busy lady, but she is a blessed lady, and I know she's going to be a blessing to you. And so thank you, Nicole, for being willing to be with me today and to share with us and our listeners. How did you go from rejected to being rescued by radical love? Share with us your transformational story and let us hear how God has done such an amazing work in your life.
It's quite the story. So thank you for inviting me on to Talking with Tonya. I appreciate it. Um, Growing up, I had two loving parents. I had a great upbringing, no issues amongst family, had a fairly stable family unit. Brother, sister, cats all along. Two parents that loved me, no issues there. The issue was primarily started in school. Um, I was always slightly overweight, and for the anybody who knows me, I'm pretty boisterous. I can be fairly loud. It's just who I am. It's just a part of my nature. But because of that, it brought on a lot of mocking, a lot of teasing, a lot of ridicule at school. Kids can be mean. And in my case, it was no different. I was bullied for being fat. I was bullied for being loud. Quite often, I would be put next to the teacher's desk in the very front, thinking that that would stop me from talking, but instead it just caused me to turn around and talk. Since I was social. I was a social butterfly. Um, it wasn't so bad in the elementary years. Elementary kids are back then were not too mean. It mostly started in like middle school area. When puberty hits and people start liking boys, liking girls, that sort of thing. That's really when the bullying started. Um, Growing up, I was always raised going to the Catholic Church. I was always involved in catechism, that sort of thing. So being around church and being around the Bible and God, it wasn't completely foreign to me. But the when we were probably in the Catholic Church is pretty regimental. You're up, you're down, whenever the priest says. But the difference that happened with our church, which was pretty cool, we probably by about grade 6, I think we got a new priest. And in grade 7 or grade 8, I made my confirmation. Uh, the church had never done this before, and they had invited what was called the charismatic Catholics. And I didn't know what they were. I was only probably 13, maybe 14 at the time, if that. And basically, what it was university students, male, female university students. And they just worshiped, they preached the love of Jesus. But as a young teenager, I had never been exposed to that. So we ended up having a sleepover at our Catholic church. It was just our confirmation class. I had a blast. I remember having so much fun. They introduced us to different ways of music. There was drums, there was guitar, nothing that we ever had in the Catholic Church. Usually it was just our choir, and not to say anything bad about my church because I did enjoy going to it. But it was very different. And it just felt like nothing but pure love.
Mm.
And I remember at one point telling one of the university students saying, I just want to do what you're doing. Like, I really want to do what you're doing. And his response to me was, "Oh, I follow Jesus. That's following Jesus. You just have to follow Jesus and you can be like us." Well, at that moment, I really want to do that. But of course, the weekend ended, life took over, and it kind of got pushed to the back of my mind, as it typically would, being a young teenager. Um, Anyways, moving forward, what ended up happening, and I didn't know this until hindsight, hindsight's always 2020, me making that commitment that I wanted to follow Jesus. Well, of course, a number of different things started to snowball after that. And when I hit grade 10, where I went to school, our school brings in different schools from outside surrounding areas. Some of them have to travel 45 minutes to get to school. So it's a pretty big deal, though. Grade 10, you know, you're going to have this influx of new students, and there's a possibility that you can make all brand new friends. So it's really an exciting time. Up to this point, I had a really core group of friends that I hung out with since pretty much early elementary. So these people start coming, we start meeting new people, and all of a sudden, I noticed that some of my childhood friends are starting to get a little more distant from me. I'm noticing the I'm noticing the teasing that didn't typically come from my childhood friends are now coming from my childhood friends. Um, and that was hard. And I remember having a crush on this boy. Of course, it was grade 10, and he was from one of the away schools. And I remember I had mentioned it to one of my childhood friends who I had been friends with forever. And that person told another person, and it just snowballed until one day we were in the cafeteria, and one of the guys stood on the table
Mm.
and in front of the whole school yelled that I was had a crush on this guy, and how funny that was because I was so fat and so loud, and he's a hockey player and he would never in 1,000 years want anything to do with me. Of course, it was humiliating. Into the bathroom. Just wanted to die in the moment. Didn't want to be around, just wanted to die in the moment. I managed to get through the rest of the day, and I remember going home, and over the next couple of days, I don't know exactly how long, but I did have a job as a lifeguard at the time. So I had my own money. And I remember I thought it would be better for me not even to be alive. So as a teenager, back then, there wasn't a whole lot, not like today. There wasn't a lot of drugs like today, thankfully. And I went out and I bought a bottle of Tylenol. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to overdose on Tylenol and I'll just be gone. It'll be the end of my life and I won't have to live this life anymore. Nobody's going to miss me. I'm teased all the time. Nobody loves me. Nobody's going to miss me. So that is where my thought was as a teenager. Um, so I ended up, I don't remember how many pills were in the bottle, but they were extra strength. So they were 500 milligram tabs. And now being a paramedic, I now understand that overdose by Tylenol, it's not a good way to die, if there's ever a good way to die, really. But an overdose with Tylenol, you tend to get sick the first 8 to 12 hours, but then it's a very slow, agonizing death because it's only 3 to 4 days later that your liver catches up and your liver will go into end stage liver failure, causing all of your organs to follow. And although I had some belly pain, I of course never told my parents what I had done, but I somehow survived that. I had taken a lot of pills. Like, I'm only guessing. I had taken probably 60 to 80 pills. I had taken a lot of pills. So I miraculously survived that episode. I did go on. I did go on to get past that, and in grade 11, when I discovered that I no longer had my childhood friends, I ended up hanging out with a group of friends that accepted me for who I was, or so I thought. This group of friends They were the party group. They were involved in drinking. They were involved in alcohol. Some of them had gone in and out of prison. I remember one time being invited to a party and being given strict orders. You don't talk when you go into this party. They'll give you the cue whether or not you're accepted. If you're accepted, they'll give you a drink. And if you're accepted, then you're allowed to hang out, but you don't say anything. So I didn't know what I was expecting. I walked into this party and oh wow. It was a lot of things I had never seen before. There was a ton of drugs everywhere. There was smoke everywhere. There was alcohol everywhere. There was people in rooms having sex. There was just it was nothing that my teenage self had ever been exposed to. And after about 15, 20 minutes, somebody comes up and gives me a beer. And my friend looks at me and says, "We're accepted. We can stay. We're accepted." Great. I'm being accepted. I'm not being teased. I'm not being made fun of. I'm now in a circle of people that have actually accepted me. I'm like thinking, okay, first time ever. I'm being accepted by people without being bullied. So I remember that was my first time drinking, and I was pretty drunk. I got very, very sick. I remember throwing up. It was disgusting. I felt horrible. But the following day, uh, my friend just kept saying, "Wasn't that fun? Wasn't that awesome? We got accepted, blah, blah, blah." I come to find out later on that the home we were at was actually the home of a drug dealer who had been in and out of prison multiple times. Um, anyways, I my the friend that I hung out with, she was wonderful. It was the excluding people around. But obviously I got in with a bad crowd, period. Thankfully, because I was a lifeguard and a swim instructor, my aquatics was number one in my life at the time. And my mom recognized that I was going down a really slippery path. I had become belligerent with my parents. I was dishonorable to my parents. I had attempted to run away from home. I actually jumped on a bus and ran away 4 hours away, walking down the street, and was picked up by the police and was put into a holding cell until my parents came to pick me up. Needless to say, after that, big changes happened, and I was on pretty tight rope with my parents. Unlike today, where you can really monitor where your kids are because of technology, it was much harder back then because there was no cell phones or anything like that. Anyways, so my mom had gone to where I had worked and spoke with my boss. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know this, but my boss agreed to give me as many hours as she possibly could. So every chance I had, swimming was my life. Every chance I had, I was at the swimming pool, whether it was 6 o'clock in the morning to lifeguard early bird swims, or whether it was 10 o'clock at night closing up. If I was not in school, I was at the swimming pool, which saved me because it kept me away from that group. And it was hard. It was not as difficult to say, "I'm not available. I can't hang out with you. My mom won't let me hang out with you," because now I could use the excuse, "Well, I have to work. Work comes first. I have to work." Grade 12 came and I did manage to graduate. Of course, my grade 11 year, my marks really suffered. So I did graduate with my graduating class. And by that point, my childhood friends had started to accept me again and apologize for some of the previous things that had been said. And so I kind of were chumming around with them a little bit, but mostly my friends were other lifeguards. Like if my swimming people were my close-knit friends. So I graduated. After I graduated, I ended up returning to school just to upgrade my grade 11 because at that point I had messed up my grade 11 so badly. There was no post-secondary that was going to look at me. It wasn't going to happen. So I went back to school one more year, upgraded stuff, and then eventually I went on to university. University was awesome. I was I was 8 hours away from where I lived. Nobody knew me. Well, my sister knew me because my sister went to university at the same place I went. Uh, but it was fantastic. I was able to take on a whole new life. I didn't have to worry about the bullying. I didn't have to worry about the constant rejection from people. Uh, People didn't care if I was somewhat overweight because I was always athletic. So I actually took physical education at university, and I didn't allow my weight to stop me. I was not like, I was still athletic enough that I could do that. Um, I had all kinds of friends. I lived in residence. I made tons of friends at university. And for the first time, I was feeling, wow, I'm actually being accepted here. People like me. And I didn't have that sense of constant rejection. It was a wonderful feeling until my second year in university. Because I took physical education, we had to take certain physical labs. So one of the labs we had to take was gymnastics. I love gymnastics, but growing up where I was, there was no such thing as gymnastics. I came from a small town. There was very minimal things available. So when I had the opportunity to take gymnastics, I was thrilled. We had to choose a lab. We had to do one of three. We either had to do the uneven bars, the parallel bars, and we had to do a floor routine. So when I had told my professor that I wanted to do the uneven bars, my professor, in front of other students, point blank looked at me and said, "You're too fat. You will never be able to do the uneven bars." And he said this in front of my entire class, university class, second year university. So it's one thing to be rejected by people of your own age, but to be rejected by a professor and to be humiliated by somebody you had trusted. This man was probably in his 40s, and he's telling a 20-year-old this in front of her whole entire class. I just wanted to curl in a ball and just die. So all of those feelings of rejection and wanting to commit suicide, they all resurfaced. It was pretty rotten. And I tried to be the funny person at the time because I didn't know how to hold back my tears in front of my whole class. And I still had to go through like 40 minutes of the class after he had said that. So it was horrible. I remember that weekend going out with some friends, and I thought, you know what? Maybe we'll just go to a house party, and if there's drugs, I'm just gonna go right on out with the drugs, and I won't have to worry about it. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So I ended up going out with somebody who I normally don't hang out with, but I knew she was a party girl. And I knew that she was heavily involved in drugs. So I thought, why not? Perfect opportunity. I'll get my hands on some drugs. I won't have to worry about that. And the whole thoughts of suicide was in my head again. I just didn't want to be here. So we go to this party, and similar to when I went to a party in grade 11, it was something I had never experienced. But of course, at university level, you have kids that are of age now. So it was even more than what I had experienced in my grade 11 year. Unlike having people having sex, at least in closed rooms, we walked in and people were having sex everywhere. And I didn't care because I didn't think I was worthy enough to worry about that. I had been rejected, I felt, by so many friends, and now this professor was rejecting me. I didn't care. I just went in there. My goal was to get drunk. My goal was to find some drugs that would just take me out. And I remember going upstairs at one point because that's where the bathroom was, and there was a couch that was sitting outside the bathroom. And I'm pretty certain I probably fell on the couch because of how drunk I was. And I thought, hey, I'm just going to sit here for a moment. I thought I had passed out. And during the time that I thought I had passed out, I had heard somebody say, "You got to get out of here. You got to leave right now." And I thought it was my friend that I'd gone to the party with. So when I opened my eyes, I looked around, there was nobody there, not a single soul. Everybody was downstairs. I thought, that's weird. Wow. Like I know I'm drunk, but that was pretty clear. Anyways, it was enough that I decided I needed to get out of there. So I did leave the party. It turns out about 30 to 40 minutes afterwards, we hear sirens, and I'm still like downtown area, and I'm by myself, and I see police just one after another. Vroom, vroom, vroom. And I'm thinking, wow, where are they all going? It's not until the following day that I found out that they had raided the house that we were at, and quite a few people, including the person I had gone to the party with, had all been arrested under drug charges. Many of them were put into jail. Many of them were had to face going to court. And at that point, I thought, wow, I don't know what happened. I don't know why I got the sense to get through there, but that was amazing. And again, at this point, I did not know God. Although I had grown up going to church, I did not have a relationship with God. I did not have a relationship with Jesus. So to me, that was just fluke. That was complete fluke that I got out of there, and I did not get arrested. Um, Thankfully, I did eventually. I mean, university was a wonderful experience for me, except for that sense of rejection from the prof. But after me getting out of that party, I don't know if it was a kind of like a wake up call. The rest of my university years, my third and my fourth year, I sort of cleaned up some and decided, all right, enough's enough. I'm just going to get my university years. I still was in the party scene, but much less. I again focused on swimming. So if I wasn't doing my studies, I was at the swimming pool. Swimming saved me a lot while growing up because I was always teaching lessons. Once I graduated from university, I went on to become an aquatics director at another facility. And that was my first job post university. I was thrilled. That is where I ended up meeting my first real boyfriend. And throughout university, like there was the odd guy that I would get together with, and there was the odd fling here and there, but nothing serious. There was never anything serious because I was always the overweight girl. People never looked at the overweight girl. People always looked for the skinny girls that wore next to nothing to the bars and showed a lot of skin. I was never one of those people. I did cover up and I was overweight, so I wasn't going to show off my body. Um, anyway, so when I did get my first job, I eventually did meet my first boyfriend, and after a couple of years, he did ask me to marry him. I was thrilled. I loved him. He was good to me. We had many happy years. And of course, I did say yes, that I was going to marry him. One of the big things that I remember looking back is the day of my wedding. I remember I was just moments before walking down the aisle, and I turned to my bridemaid and to my maid of honor. I looked at her, I said, man, I don't think I'm supposed to be marrying him. I think there's like, I just have this gut feeling I'm not doing the right thing. And of course, my maid of honor, and I love her dearly, she says to me, she goes, oh, it's just wedding jitters, which most people would have said, it's just wedding jitters. Let's face it. Anyway, so I went with it's wedding jitters. So I went down, and of course, we married, and we ended up being married for a total of 16 years. For a total of 16 years, we were together for a total of 20. Anyways, the first several years were great. We traveled, we had all kinds of fun. We went to concerts, we had a wonderful time. I desperately wanted to be a mom. And I wanted to be a mom, I remember from the time I was 16. That was one of my future dreams, hopes and dreams, to be a mom. It turns out that I was not able to conceive by birth. So I was like, okay, let's look into adoption. There's adoptions in my family, so I was never opposed to the idea of adoption. I was always pro adoption. And but it took some time for my husband at the time to get around the idea. And eventually he did come to the idea that okay, let's look at this and let's do that. Okay, fantastic. Anyways, after we had adopted our kids, we had adopted twin boys. They were 3.5 when we adopted them. I have zero regrets in adopting them, love them dearly. But we were faced with some pretty heavy challenges. They both came from trauma backgrounds, brand new parents to toddler twins. We went from zero to big, and it was a lot. After after about a year, we identified the challenges that we were faced. I mean, it was unsurmountable, the challenges, because both of them had special needs. Both of them were significantly impacted by trauma. And if you don't know much about trauma, which I know, Tonya, you do, but many people don't, trauma can mask a whole world of different types of diagnosis. So we kept getting these diagnoses, and the diagnoses weren't fitting. And I remember at the young age of 6, one of my boys having to live at the IWK for 6 months because of the amount of anger he had. That was hard. And all the while, still trying to work a full-time job, still trying to raise his twin brother, and trying to still carry on married life. Things have to suffer. Our finances took a dive. And when the boys were about 8, because of financial reasons, my husband at the time decided to start working up north. And what was supposed to only be a 1-year stint turned into a 4-year stint. And I don't know if part of it was totally due to finances. I think part of it may have also been it allowed him to have a little bit of a break, which in hindsight, I don't blame him. It was hard. We went through a crazy difficult time. No parenting journey that anybody would ever want to be faced with. I had thousands of people constantly telling me, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. I do it because I had to do it. They were my children. Um, Anyways, when after about the 4-year stint, my at the time husband decided enough was enough, and he came back to Nova Scotia to start working. I don't even think he had been here for a full year, and a number of circumstances happened during that 4 years. Like, we had lost my father-in-law, so my husband's father, which was a devastating blow to our family. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. I loved him dearly. But that took a huge toll, and we were both dealing with depression. We were both dealing with so much in regards to the trauma we were all facing as a family. And it seemed like nobody we went to as far as counseling seemed to know the answers as to how to fix our life. I had started taking the kids to church. We had kind of jumped around from the United Church. Kids ministry failed at the United Church, so we went to Presbyterian Church. Presbyterian Church, kids ministry failed. So we ended up taking like a hiatus from church for probably a couple of years because there was nowhere for the kids to go, and the kids couldn't sit during the service. And so we just ended up not going. Red flag moment that happened to me right around the time that my ex decided to start working in Nova Scotia again was one of the sons came up to me one morning. I don't even remember what morning it was, and said, Mommy, why do we not go to church anymore? We used to go to church all the time. Why do we not go to church anymore? And that was a red flag. And at the time, I thought, you know what? We have to go. So I said to my husband at the time, I said, why don't we go to the Nazarene church? We should just, the kids know people. There's a ton of kids there. It's got a huge kids ministry. We should just go. And the response I got was, I'm done shopping for churches. No. So I said, okay, well, I'm going without you. So I took the kids, and the very following Sunday was at church with the 2 boys. Uh, Within that year of him working back, uh, it was hard becoming a family of 4 again on a consistent basis. So the challenges were up, the challenges were down. We ended up going to marriage counseling, thinking that that would solve the answers. It didn't solve the answers. I started having probably 3, maybe 4 months. I started to have suspicions that there may possibly have been an affair happening, but I wasn't confident. I wasn't sure. My aunt had seen something on social media and questioned my mother about it. And my mother showed it to me, and I thought, woof. So, of course, I questioned him at it. And he, of course, had his reasons, and I believed him. I had no reasons to really doubt him. Anyways, it eventually came to a head, and I was devastated when I found out. That was the ultimate rejection. We had been together for 20 years. Not saying that it was a glorious marriage, because after we had the kids, it was hard. In hindsight, we weren't happy. I mean, it ultimately, God knew what he was doing when he separated us. Um, but at the time, I didn't see that. At the time, it was just gut wrenching pain and more rejection, deep, deep hurted rejection. And I mean, the person that the affair was with a former friend. So that was hard. um, that weekend was a weekend of tears and a weekend of trying to maintain my kids so that my kids weren't getting super hurt. But I mean, they witnessed, one of them in particular witnessed a lot. If I could go back, I would hopefully change things, but it happened. Thankfully, at that point, my mom was living with us. I had actually She had been living with us for about a year. Anyways, so I remember it happened on a Friday when the news came out, and of course, I burst into tears. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I basically spent nonstop crying. And I remember Sunday afternoon looking at my mom saying, "Do you mind just," it might have even been around lunchtime, "Do you mind just putting a movie on for the kids? I'm gonna go take a couple of Ativan and I'm just gonna go have a nap. I can't, like, I'm exhausted." So I remember going through my pills, and I wasn't on very many medications at the time, like maybe 3, but my mind had not slept, and my mind was just traumatized. So my mind was not thinking clearly at the time. And I remember looking at pill bottles thinking, "Well, that's not Ativan. Well, that's not Ativan. Oh, there's my Ativan." So in my head, I was gonna take just 2. And I remember being so excited that I found it. I remember falling back on my bed, and in my brain, I had taken 2, but what in reality happened, I actually took the whole bottle, and that bottle had 72 milligrams of Ativan in it. Now, I don't remember a lot after that. As a paramedic, my mom had to call my coworkers. She called 911. It was 2 coworkers that came and picked me up. I was not in a good state. 2 RCMP officers came to my home, both of whom I know through work and highly respected. I ended up not in the right state of mind, of course, saying some things to these people who I have no memory of it whatsoever. Ended up waking up in the hospital, no memory. During that time that I was in the hospital, apparently I was out for almost 36 hours. But during that time, a crisis counselor was brought to my room. My, at the time, pastor and his wife came to my room. I don't remember any of it. Have to this day, it's blocked out of my memory. Uh, when I finally came to, the nurses told me who would come to visit. No memory. I eventually had to go back and see that crisis counselor at the end of the week and looked down. I said, "I'm really sorry. Apparently, I already met you." And he goes, "Yes, we had a lovely conversation." I said, "I'm sorry. I don't have any memory of that whatsoever." So that was an eye opener. But during that time, it was because of all of this that I started really turning towards the church. My church family just they embraced me. I spent almost an entire year after that separation having just nothing but anger and bitterness and hatred. I was not a nice person to be around. Um, I was very short with my kids. I got angry easily at my kids. They could have done something simple and I'd be yelling. And I would always feel remorseful afterwards. I always went back to them and apologized, hugged them, kissed them, told them how much I loved them. But in the heat of the moment, I didn't know how to deal with any kind of stress. About it was 13 months after the separation that my church invited me to go to a ladies retreat. I'd never been to one. It was my first time. And of course, I had declared bankruptcy at the time of the separation as well. So not only did I have the rejection of my husband, I also had no finances. I was completely emptied out of everything. Um, the home that we were living in, I was forced to put it up for foreclosure and had no idea where I was going to be putting my children. And because my children were constantly fighting, they were like oil and water. They were beyond normal sibling rivalry. And I knew that I couldn't go into an apartment building because we would have been evicted. So trying to find a place to live was a nightmare. But in the midst of all of this, my church insisted, we want to pay your way. We want you to come to ladies retreat. So I went not knowing what to expect. I remember on a Saturday morning at ladies retreat, we broke up into small groups, and the small group leader wanted us to tell a little bit of our testimony. I didn't even know what a testimony was back then. I'm like, okay, whatever. What do you mean? What is on your mind? What's on my mind? Well, I'll tell you what's on my mind. My ex-husband and her not so nice words were said about my former friend. Anyways, and that evening during service, there was a girl standing next to me. And suddenly during the service, or even after the service, I'm not sure, but it was still during the service, she looked at me, she goes, "You need to go to the altar." And I said, "No, I'm not an altar girl. I'm not going to the altar. Forget it." She's like, "No, God just told me you need to go to the altar." I'm like, "I'm not going to the altar." I'm like, "It's just not who I am." Anyway, so next thing you know, she is like pushing myself along with her to go out of the pew and go up to the altar. And I was very reluctant. I did not want to be there. Yeah. Anyways, while I was up there, Pastor Jody came over and started praying with me. Now, what was interesting is that shortly after my separation was the very first time I saw Pastor Jody, and there was a friend who had introduced us. I had never met her from a day, and I had never met her at all. And this friend wanted me to go talk to this total stranger. I'm like, "Are you nuts? I'm not going to pour my life out to a total stranger." So the way my friend got me to Pastor Jody's was because she told me where Pastor Jody lived, and I had loved the house for several years. And I wanted to see inside the home. That's how I got there. Anyway, so coincidentally, a year later, Pastor Jody is now praying over me. And I don't even remember everything that was said, but I remember her asking me if I believed in Jesus, if I wanted to accept him as my savior. And I remember a few other things, not in clear detail. And of course, my answers were yes. If he can take away this pain, yes. And she started praying. And I have no idea how long I was there. I was long enough that I had just barrels of snot coming out of me, and my whole body went numb. And I had to sit on my bum because I couldn't sit on my knees anymore because they were so painful. And I remember just having this constant heaviness, which I had been carrying around for a year plus. And suddenly this heaviness, it was gone. It just, all of a sudden, I just felt exhausted. And I didn't know if the exhaustion was because had been crying so hard and I was just exhausted from that. I didn't know what had happened, but I felt light and I had a sense of warmth flushing through me. And I was just like, wow, okay, maybe I'm having a hot flash. And I didn't know what was going on. But when things kind of calmed down and I opened my eyes and I started looking around, there was at least 15 ladies that all had hands on me praying. And at that moment, there was a couple of ladies that looked at me and said, "We don't know what spirit was in you, but we just watched a shadow leave you." And at that point, it was all brand new to me. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you guys are nuts. So that evening when I went to my hotel room, like I always did, I would creep the social media. And all of a sudden I discovered I'm creeping the social media. I have none of those angry feelings. They're gone. So for the next several weeks, I'm testing that theory out and they're gone. I had zero zero bitterness, zero hatred, zero angry feelings. I now find myself praying for their relationship because I now recognized that we weren't in a healthy relationship. We were just living day to day, but we were not healthy. Now, what was it nice learning? Was it nice the way we split up? Maybe not. But I found myself in the place where I was able to forgive my ex. I was able to forgive my former friend. And I found myself praying for their relationship. That is only a God given miracle.
Mhm.
Fast forward to last year at Ladies Retreat. So 5 years out, 18, 19, 20, 20. Yeah, 5 years. In a 5 year period, year later, I'm at Ladies Retreat taking communion. And all of a sudden, I have this huge revelation that God just downloaded into me like a download into a computer. And He brought me through my childhood from my very youngest age that I can remember all the way up to my present. And He was point blank showing me the areas that He was protecting me all the while I was growing up. The amount of times that I attempted suicide, the taking me away from friends that were not really friends, putting me into places that He knew were healthier, like the swimming. And it was amazing, this download that came to me. And here I am through all of that horrible rejection, all the way that I used to live, the drinking, the thankfully the drugs, I didn't go hard. It was primarily marijuana and hash back then. But all of those horrible things that I used to live for, like He's brought me full forward. I have now had a divine relationship, like a divine interaction with Him, that there is no way that I can deny what had happened. For almost 4 weeks, He pressed on me last year, and I didn't know what was happening. And it was just like He was, boom, you're doing this, boom, you're doing this. And a couple of times, Jody in Oxford made a comment. I feel there's somebody being called into ministry, and that happened. And I felt like this weight going. That's you, Nicole. That's you, Nicole. I'm like, okay. And I just found myself crying at the back of this church, going, "Oh, can I just run away?" And at Ladies Retreat, after they prayed for all the pastors, Jody steals the mic for like 30 seconds. She's like, I need 30 seconds of your time. She's like, I feel there's somebody in this room right now that is supposed to be in this circle. And again, the exact same thing happened. I was like, oh gosh, what are you doing to me, God? What are you doing to me? And it was April 23rd that I actually finally admitted that I felt a call into ministry. Um, it was after I admitted that call that a weight of heaviness that I had been carrying around for a month in my denial, because I think I always knew what was happening, but I was in absolute denial out of fear. And when I finally admitted it, it was just like poof, all the weight was gone. And I had this overwhelming sense of joy and just almost uncontrollable giddiness. I went for like probably 3 or 4 months. I think I was floating a cloud nine, and I couldn't tell enough people. Anyway, so fast forward, and I quickly started course of study, and now I have my local minister's license. I'm doing kids ministry, and I'm in it for the long haul, I believe, if God willing.
Wow. Wow. Just wow. The grace of God and the mercy of our Jesus, that even when you were doing your deal and all that heartache and all that rejection, God was still reaching out to you with love in
Oh yes.
miraculous ways, because His hand was on your life. And I know that must make a difference for you, not only in the ministering that you're doing with the children, but also in your work as a paramedic, to be ministering
Unbelievable.
compassion, because you know
Yeah.
what pain feels like. So it's like He redeemed all of that rejection with His radical love. and now uses you in ways that otherwise perhaps you would not have been either used or as effective in being used in
And I'm
those.
100% a different person. Like the way that I deal with, the way that I handle stress, the way that I just, yeah, I'm 100% different person. I can't even compare it. My kids see the difference. Um, I was a yelling mom. I was a stressed out mom. I still have stresses even though they don't live with me. But I handle things so much more compassionate, full of love. Things that used to really grind me or get on my nerves. I have so much patience, which I know has to come from above because I'm put into situations where anybody would lose their patience. And I have this crazy amount of tolerance and patience. And my go-to now is prayer.
Rather than the pill bottle, it's prayer. How
Hmm.
precious is that? And I love the story. I think one of my favorite God moments for me in the times we've had together today has been praying for your ex-husband and your friend who are now in a relationship together, which,
They're now married, actually.
and you were saying that that was the worst betrayal of them all, the most
Yep.
painful. And yet now God has lifted that off of your heart and
Hmm.
replaced it with this gracious, merciful, compassionate love and forgiveness for them. That is just, you can't make that stuff up.
No, I would never have been able to find that forgiveness on my own. Never.
Today, I can't help but wonder, Nicole, if there isn't somebody listening that has just found out that they're experiencing the worst of rejection, that betrayal. And what would you say to them that would help them to go from rejection to being rescued by radical love?
Well, if they don't know Jesus, because I didn't know him, if they don't know Jesus, try to figure out who he is. Get into your Bible, go to a church, go find anybody you know that may know may know him and can introduce you to him. Because had it not been for my church family, I may not be where I am today. God put certain people in my path, and I'm so grateful for the path that he led me on. I look back and hindsight's always 2020, and I have zero regrets. I'm so graciously grateful for the path that I have gone on. Even even that heartache that I went through in raising my children, and I was not the most gracious or loving mom all the time, but I have been I've been able to help other adoptive moms. I've been able to help other adoptive families. I've been able to help so many people, even just in the past year in sharing my story. And I've not shared my story to a ton of people, but God has put certain people in my path that I have felt, you know what? I think you could benefit from hearing my story. And the people that I have shared it with, they've all had like, oh, like wow moments. So I would
God,
just encourage people to get to know who our Lord is. It's one thing to believe in God, but it's a completely different thing to have a relationship. I've always believed in God. There has never been a day in my life that I've not believed that there was God as our creator. Never a day in my life. I have always believed, but I have not always had a relationship. That has been tenfold for me.
I would love to end our time together today by having you be that person for someone to introduce them to a relationship with Jesus, because you're absolutely right. Not only have I experienced in my own life, the word tells us even demons believe and they shudder, that there really is an eternal difference between believing and being a believer.
Big time.
There's a difference between being one
Big
who
time.
believes and then one who is a
Yeah.
believer. And so I would be so honored if you would end our time together today with Talking with Tonya and lead that person into that relationship with Jesus.
Gladly. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for allowing me to share my story, Lord. Lord, I pray that my story will help others. I pray that it will encourage others to get to know you. I pray that it will help somebody find salvation in you. Lord, I was that person. I always believed in you. I never remember a day in my life where I doubted who you were, but there were many, many years that I did not know you personally or have that relationship with you, Father. So, my prayer today is for anybody who hears this. I pray they take the time to get into your word. I pray they take the time to really, really try to find your face, Lord. Try to get to know who you are. And if they don't know how to do that, they can reach out to me if they know how. They can reach out to their local church. They can reach out to anybody that they know that may have a relationship with you. But Father, in all of it, it is by your will. So, Father, I just pray that you work on many hearts. I pray that you shine your face down on them and be the light that you are within their darkness, Father. You are certainly that light for me, and I will never be able to express my words of gratitude enough for you. I ask all of this in your Son's heavenly name, Jesus. Amen.
And so powerful, so simple, yet so supernatural. And again, thank you for spending time with me today, with Talking with Tonya and
You're
sharing
welcome.
your
Thank you for having me.
story. I know
Mm,
from my own personal experience that going back into those years can be painful and filled with a measure of shame. And it's a gift that you give when you trust other people with
mm,
that type of testimony. So I'm very honored that you did that. And perhaps you are someone today that is experiencing rejection. Perhaps it has been, as Nicole has shared, and even in my own life, times of bullying at school and being teased and publicly humiliated. Maybe it's rejection from your family. Perhaps you too have had rejection in a really close friendship like Nicole, or even in your marriage. I want you to know there truly is a Jesus that truly
mm.
does see you, and he really can
Amen.
rescue you from that root of rejection, and with radical love, make it a very place where you are able to look back and say, look and see what the Lord has
Mhm.
done. He was in that moment. He was part of that story. He intervened in that situation, and look and see what he has done in my life.
Amen.
And it will be something contagious, just as Nicole has said, that as she shares her story, it is impacting other people because it's God contagious. It's the contagious love of Jesus Christ. And if you've asked the Lord to help you, I want to hear from you. I want you to be able to reach out at any time at Tonya, Tonya, at oxnaz.ca, and let me know that you've made that decision. I'd love to be able to pray with you, for you, and give you some resources that will help you in this new journey with Jesus, and be able to introduce you to our Oxnaz community, online community of people all around the world in different cultures and countries that have already made this decision to seek and serve Jesus Christ. I promise you, you won't regret it. So reach out today, Tonya at
Amen.
oxnaz.ca. So meanwhile, I pray God's blessing on you. I speak Jesus over you and ask that our God would embrace you with his grace. And I can't wait to meeting up with you next time. I already know who the guest is. And it's another amazing, amazing, amazing transformational story. So you're not going to want to miss it. So be sure to subscribe, turn on the notifications, give us a thumbs up, make a comment so that we can continue to share these stories, not just with you, but with those that you love, those that are in your family, your friends, your community. So let's get the word out that there is hope for each one, because God so loved us that he sent that hope in the form of his son, Jesus Christ. So be blessed today and go and be a blessing to others. We'll see you next time.